Today I want to talk about subject-verb agreement. Now, when we hear the word agreement, we think of people getting along or people deciding together to do something. And subject-verb agreement is a lot like that. Now, verbs must agree with their subjects in two ways. In number, which means singular or plural, and in person. And we have first, second, and third. So let's look at some examples of what I'm talking about. To make a verb in the present tense agree with a third person singular subject, add a dash s or es to the base form. Let's look at some examples. A vegetarian diet lowers the risk of heart disease. We use the base form of the verb lower, add an s, and that works as a verb that goes with our singular subject, diet. We have the sun rises in the east. Sun is a singular subject, so we put s on the end of rise, and there we go. The moon orbits the earth once a day. The moon is a singular subject. Put an s on the end of orbit. We have a verb that agrees with our subject. Now, if you have a verb in the present tense and you need it to agree with any other subject, regardless of what person it is, use the base form of the verb. For example, I miss my family. Don't put an s, don't put an es, just use the base form of the verb. They live in another state. Again, no s, no es, just the base form of the verb. We talk on the phone often. This is the same thing. We have a third person plural. We don't put an s, don't do anything to the verb, just use the base form, and we have agreement. Now, the verbs have and be are irregular. They don't follow the s or es pattern with third person singular subjects. The verb have changes to has, and then be has irregular forms of both the present and the past tense. So it could be is, could be was. It depends on which tense you're in. So for example, war is hell. We have third person singular subject. We use the irregular form of be, is. Same thing with the next example. The soldier was brave beyond the call of duty. With be being an irregular verb, that's how you make it agree. When you have words that come between the subject and the verb, you need to make sure that the verb agrees with the subject and not with any other noun that comes in between. Let's look at the example. Many books on the bestseller list have little literary value. The subject of the sentence is books, not list, so we're going to use have. If we take out the prepositional phrase on the bestseller list, we would say many books have little literary value. So that's how we know we have agreement. You also need to be careful when you use phrases like as well as, along with, in addition to, together with, and other things like that. They don't make a singular subject plural. Let's look at the example. A passenger, as well as the driver, was injured in the accident. The subject has a grammatically singular subject, passenger. But when you add as well as, it makes it seem like it would become plural, but it really doesn't. The subject is still passenger. Sometimes we have compound subjects. When you join them by and, that generally makes them plural. So let's look at some examples of that. A backpack, a canteen, and a rifle were issued to each recruit. We have a compound subject consisting of three things: backpack, canteen, and rifle. They are plural. That's why we use the plural form of the be verb, were. Now, if subjects joined by and are considered to be a single unit, or if they refer to the same person or thing, they're singular, and they're going to take a singular verb form. Let's look at a couple of examples. The lead singer and chief songwriter wants to make the new songs available online. Lead singer and chief songwriter are the same person, so that is singular. Drinking and driving remains a major cause of highway accidents and fatalities. Drinking and driving is being taken as a single thing, so it uses a singular verb form. Sometimes we have compound subjects that are joined by or nor. In this case, the verb agrees with whatever is closer to the verb. So let's look at some examples. Neither my roommate nor my neighbors like my loud music. Now, neighbors is the closest thing to the verb, so we're going to use the plural subject that agrees with the plural verb that agrees with the subject neighbors. Here we have either the witnesses or the defendant is lying. Defendant is singular, so we use the singular form of the verb is. Let's talk about collective nouns as subjects. Collective nouns are words like family, team, audience, group, jury, crowd, band, class, committee, and also fractions. And these things can take either singular or plural verbs. It depends on whether they're referring to the group as a whole or the individual members of the group. You have to look at the sentence to determine the best verb. After deliberating, the jury reports its verdict. In this case, the jury is acting as a single unit, so it is singular, and we use a singular form of the verb. But if we say the jury still disagree on a number of counts, here we're talking about the jury as individual people, a plural, so we would use a plural form of the verb. If you're saying something like 2/3 of the park has burned, 2/3 is talking about a single amount that burned. But if you say 1/3 of the student body were commuters, you're talking about those individual students who commute to campus each day. When you have phrases starting with the number of, that is singular. When it says a number of, that's plural. Let's look at some examples. The number of applicants for the internship was unbelievable. Now here we have the number of, so it is singular. But in the next example, a number of applicants were put on the waiting list. This is plural. So it's important to know the difference between those. When you're looking at a subject that's an indefinite pronoun, that's going to be something that isn't referring to a specific person or thing. Those will most of the time take a singular verb form. And here I've included a chart of some common indefinite pronouns so that you can take a look at them and understand what they are. When you see these words, these are indefinite pronouns. Most of the time, these will need a singular verb in order to agree. Let's look at some examples. Of the two jobs, neither holds much appeal. Neither is not referring to anything specific. It's singular. It takes a singular verb. Each of the plays depicts a hero undone by a tragic flaw. Again, each is indefinite. It's singular. Uses a singular verb. Though many apply, few are chosen. Again, indefinite, singular, uses a singular verb. Now, if you have things like all, any, enough, more, most, none, or some, those can be either singular or plural. It depends on what they're referring to. All of the cake was eaten. All means one. So this is a singular noun. But if you're talking about all of the candidates, this is talking about them as individual people. So you're going to use a plural verb to agree with that. Now let's talk about who, which, and that as subjects. These are relative pronouns. When these are used as subjects, the verb agrees with the antecedent of the pronoun. Now, antecedent is the word to which the pronoun refers. You'll see what I mean when we look at the examples. Fear is an ingredient that goes into creating stereotypes. The antecedent of the pronoun that is ingredient. Ingredient is singular, so the verb must be ingredient. But if we have the sentence, guilt and fear are ingredients that go into creating stereotypes, now we have the antecedent of that being ingredients with an S. Now it's plural, so we have to have a plural verb. Sometimes you have problems when it says one of the. In general, one of the is going to take a plural verb, while the only one of the is going to take a singular verb. And that's important to remember. Here we have an example. Carla is one of the employees who always work overtime. We're talking about who referring to employees, which is plural, so we need the plural verb. If we look at the other example, Ming is the only one of the employees who always works overtime. Ming is only one. So now the verb is singular, and we need a singular verb to go with the subject, Ming. When you have linking verbs, those have to agree with the subject also. Linking verbs are going to come in front of the verb, and you want to make sure that you don't put the verb that agrees with the subject complement, which comes after. These three key treaties are the topic of my talk. Treaties is the subject. It's plural. So it is going to use the plural verb. Nero Wolfe's passion was orchids. The subject is passion, not orchids. So you need to be very careful that you agree with the right part of the sentence. When you have subjects that have plural forms but singular meanings, and what I mean by this is sometimes things end in S and it looks like it would be plural, but it's really just singular. So, like, for example, measles still strikes many Americans. Measles ends in S and it looks plural, but it's actually singular. You have some nouns, like statistics and politics. They can be either singular or plural, depending on the context. Let's look at statistics. Statistics is a course I really dread. Statistics is talking about one specific college class, and that's a course I really dread. It's singular. The statistics in that study are questionable. That's more than one, so it's plural. Then we have sometimes subjects that follow the verb. In English, verbs usually come after the subject, but if you reverse the sentence, you have to make sure that the verb agrees with the subject, not with a noun that just happens to come in front of it. So we have the example, beside the barn stand silos filled with grain. The subject is silos. It's plural, so the verb also has to be plural, stand. Look at another example. There are 5 basic positions in classical ballet. This is a sentence that begins with there. When you have there is, there are, there was, there were. There is only there as an introductory word. The subject is going to come after the verb. So in this sentence, the subject is positions. That's plural, so we also have to have a plural verb. When you're using titles and words, you need to look at those as singular verb forms, like one writer's beginning. That's the title of a book. It describes, it's singular. Steroids is a word that looks like it might be plural, but it's actually singular. When you are understanding subject-verb agreement, you're making sure that your subjects agree in number and in person with the subjects of your sentence. This is going to help make your meaning clear, and your writing will be easier to understand.